AITA for not letting a neighbor borrow my tile saw because he assumed it belonged to my boyfriend? Hey, everyone. So, I, female, 28, am writing because I'm feeling conflicted about a situation that happened recently, and I'm hoping to get some unbiased perspectives. Before I dive in, let me give you some context. I live with my boyfriend, male, 30. We have a relationship that's not exactly traditional, but it works for us. One of the main things that stands out about us is our roles. You see, I'm the one who does all the fixing, building, and DIY projects around the house. My boyfriend? Not so much. He's a great guy, but he's just not the type who's hands-on with tools, home improvement projects, or even general maintenance. He's more of a call-to-repairman kind of guy, and that's totally fine. Over the years, I've collected a ton of tools, high-quality ones, mind you. My garage is basically a little workshop full of everything you could possibly need to fix or build things. I take a lot of pride in my collection. It's not just about having tools, but about knowing how to use them and taking care of my own needs. This isn't some casual hobby for me. It's part of who I am. My boyfriend? He doesn't even know how to use most of them. We've always joked that he wouldn't be able to fix a broken chair without Googling it first. Now, here's where the situation gets a little more complicated. We recently got new neighbors, a young couple who just moved into the house across the street from us. They bought a fixer-upper, and honestly, it looked like they had their work cut out for them. The house was old, worn down, and needed a ton of repairs. The wife seems really sweet, and she's a bit of a stay-at-home type, but the husband? He seemed like he was trying to handle everything himself. The moment they moved in, it was clear they were doing most of the work themselves. It was hard not to notice the amount of noise coming from their yard as they tried to fix things up. So about a week after they moved in, the husband, let's call him Mark, came over to introduce himself. He was friendly, but from the start, it felt a bit off. He barely acknowledged me when he walked into our garage. Instead, he went straight to my boyfriend, shook his hand, and started chatting. He barely even looked at me, which honestly made me feel pretty invisible. Now, maybe it's just me, but it bugged me. It felt like he automatically assumed that my boyfriend was the one in charge of everything here, as if I wasn't part of the picture. Mark began telling us about the state of the house he'd just bought. Apparently, it had been lived in by an elderly lady for over 50 years before she passed away, and it was in dire need of repairs. He said he was trying to save money by doing everything himself, including the kitchen, which he mentioned specifically needed to be retiled. I could tell he was stressed, and I sympathized with him. Home repairs are tough, especially when you're on a budget. But I also couldn't help but notice how he kept directing everything toward my boyfriend. It was clear he was seeing him as the expert in this situation, as if I wasn't even in the room. I wasn't too surprised by that. It happens a lot. People tend to assume that men are the ones who know about tools and DIY, and women are just there to supervise or help when needed. But it still didn't sit right with me. After all, my garage is filled with tools I own. I've spent years building this collection. I worked hard to learn how to use them properly. But instead of acknowledging that, he just kept talking to my boyfriend. Finally, Mark asked if he could borrow a tile saw. He was doing the kitchen and apparently didn't have one. He then said he could probably use a few other tools, and maybe my boyfriend could help him out with some YouTube tutorials. I had a feeling this was coming, but I wasn't expecting it to be so casual. My boyfriend, being his usual laid-back self, just kind of smiled and nodded. He isn't really into DIY stuff. He's more of the I'll pay someone to do it type, so he didn't really know what to say. But then, he finally said, actually, all the tools in this garage belong to her. I have no idea how to use any of them. That's when Mark turned to me, finally acknowledging my presence. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, I guess I should have asked you then. What do you say? Offer still stands." At that moment, I felt a wave of frustration hit me. It was a mixture of surprise and annoyance. I mean, why the hell did he assume my boyfriend was the one with all the tools? Why didn't he just ask me, the one who obviously has a whole workshop in the garage? And why didn't he acknowledge me earlier when he was in the garage? It wasn't just about the tile saw, honestly. It was about how he assumed that because my boyfriend was a man, he was the one in charge of all the manly stuff. I know it sounds petty, but I was really tired of this assumption. Over the years, I've dealt with so many situations where men, even those close to me, automatically assume that I'm the one who does all the girly things while my boyfriend takes care of the heavy lifting. It's a stereotype that's ingrained in society, and I've had enough. I'm a woman who knows how to fix things, build things, and take care of myself. So, when Mark looked at me and acted like I was just there to smile and nod, I couldn't help but feel angry. So I said something snarky. I wasn't proud of it, but in the moment, it felt right. I looked at Mark and said, "Well, Maybe another man in the neighborhood can help you. I'm just a woman, so what do I know? I know. I shouldn't have said it. But at that point, I was so fed up. I wanted him to understand that his assumption was completely wrong, and I wasn't going to let it slide. I wanted him to realize that I didn't exist just as my boyfriend's support system. I had my own identity and skills. But Mark didn't respond the way I hoped. Instead of apologizing for assuming I wasn't capable or acknowledging my expertise, he just gave me a half smile, like he thought I was being a little dramatic. He didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to get it. After Mark left, I immediately felt a sense of relief, but also guilt. My boyfriend, who had been mostly quiet during the exchange, finally spoke up. He said, "You didn't have to be an asshole to him. He's just trying to be friendly." Honestly, I get it. My boyfriend didn't understand why I was so upset. He's not as sensitive to these kinds of gender dynamics because he doesn't experience them the way I do. He thought I was being overly harsh on Mark, who was just trying to ask for help. But I didn't care. It wasn't just about the tile saw. It was about making a point. I wasn't going to let someone dismiss me just because I'm a woman. As the days passed, I started feeling more and more conflicted. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I could have handled it better. But then again, why should I have to constantly bite my tongue just to avoid offending someone? Why should I let people like Mark assume that just because I'm a woman, I'm not capable of handling tools or fixing things? Eventually, I decided to talk to my boyfriend about it more seriously. I explained to him how frustrating it was when men assume they know how to handle all the physical work just because they fit some stereotype. I told him that it wasn't about the tile saw. It was about how I was being seen, or rather, not seen. He apologized for not fully understanding my perspective, but I still think he didn't quite get it. He probably never will. But here's the thing. I'm not sorry for how I acted. I'm not sorry for standing up for myself, for making sure that Mark knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. And I'm not sorry for making it clear that I'm not just here to support my boyfriend in his DIY projects. I'm the one running the show. So, AITA for the way I handled the situation with my neighbor. Maybe I could have been nicer, but honestly, I think I had every right to be frustrated. It's not just about the tools. It's about respect and recognition. I want to hear what you all think.